Hello, everyone, and welcome back to What We Seek. Today, we're going to be talking about something that has shaped art, history, and ultimately the human experience as a whole. It's something that has been poured into poetry, painted into masterpieces, sung into ballads, etched into novels, and whispered into prayers. It has sparked revolutions and ended wars. It has torn hearts apart and stitched them back together again. Today, we are talking about none other than love. But if you ask 10 different people what love is, you'll get 10 very different answers. So today, we're diving into what is love really? Everything we do is fueled by our desire to learn and grow because we believe that what we seek is also seeking us. I think we've talked about this extensively so much in the past, and I think you're right that a lot of people do confuse love with attachment.
I just wanted us to slowly grasp the idea of love and shed all else that is attaching itself to that label that's not love. So I feel like it's important that we shed all of the things that are unnecessary to get to the core meaning of love. And I know you prepared for this episode to be about love,
Yeah.
but I feel like it's important to get all things that are not love out of the way before we can really grasp the idea of love.
Yeah, so it's like only through understanding that which love is not that we can understand that
What
which love
love
is. Yes. I love it.
I love
Okay. So before we dive into what attachment is, maybe we can share our own personal experiences with it.
Okay.
Because I initially was going to ask you to share a personal anecdote about your experience with love in your life. But since we're talking about attachment, let's talk about that because for me, for example, throughout my own life, I think I've been I've fallen into the trap of misconstruing the two. So I've always been attached to people. I don't think I've ever actually experienced true romantic love in its highest form. Because if I think about it, I was always so attached to the outcome of what that person would be in my life.
So from my personal experience, the only type of attachment I've had, I've told you, even when it came to manifestation, I never attached the idea of someone else in my life. I feel like the first person that I ever loved was my mother. And I quickly learned that me being attached to her and having her state of mind fluctuate is affecting my state of being.
Yeah.
It's like string theory. When two particles are attached to each other with a string, no matter if they're light years apart, the state of one being can affect the other. So for me, I realized that early on. When my mother had her states of emotions fluctuate, it would affect me. So I learned detachment from a really young age and I practiced it in the entirety of my life. The only thing I've been attached to is, I feel because when we talk about attachment theory of John Bowlby's attachment theory.
I was just going to say what you described as an avoidant attachment style because you detached yourself from human emotion. So what you've actually described as avoidance. If we look at attachment theory, it was first developed in the 1950s by John Bowlby, and it basically looks at the way that we form emotional bonds with our primary caretaker, so our parents.
Yeah.
And it holds that the bonds that we form as children shape the way that we connect with others even as adults. And there are three primary attachment styles, but there's also a fourth one. So the first one is secure attachment. Do you want me to dive into what each one is? Do you guys think we should explain?
Yeah.
Okay. So a secure attachment style is someone who is healthy. A secure attachment style is basically that you feel safe in the presence of your loved one and you also feel safe when they are not there. So this is very likely that you grew up in a household where you were treated like you were whole and worthy, where your parent was very present, but they didn't coddle you. They weren't instilling this belief that they always had to be there. They gave you your freedom and independence, but they showed you that love was safe. I think a secure attachment style says love is safe.
And you had the freedom to explore, yet come back to them when you needed them.
Exactly.
Okay.
So you develop this bond where it's you know that love is there to support you, or if we want to use a different word, you feel a safe developing emotional bonds with others. And then if we talk about the unhealthy attachment styles, the primary two are anxious attachment style and avoidant. So it's great because I have an anxious attachment style. I can explain this one beautifully. But basically, an anxious attachment style is when you fear abandonment. You have this intense emotional bond with your caregiver, and you're so afraid that one day they're going to leave you.
Yeah.
And for me in my adult relationships, this has always led to me acting extremely anxiously. If someone doesn't respond, if they don't text me back, if they even disappear for a few hours, internally, I'm in doomsday mode. I'm like, oh my God, something bad happened. They hate me. They're never going to speak to me again. Meanwhile, it could just be that, someone's busy at work. And for me, it's not just, with romantic relationships. It also affects like friendships and things like that. Like I tend to worry a lot.
Yeah.
And then the third one, the other third unhealthy one is avoidant attachment style. So that's what you described, which is basically your parents were either like they didn't make you feel safe forming emotional bonds as children. So you had a parent who was very inconsistent, who was not okay with your emotions. So if you cried, for example, this type of parent would say, don't cry, crying is not good. They'd shut you down emotionally and make you feel like you cannot rely on them. So as a result, you detach completely from love, and love becomes this thing that in order to protect yourself, you need to stay away from it.
I did have avoidant attachment style, but not when I was an infant.
Yeah.
Later on in my adolescence years, where like when I was a teenager and my parents were going through a divorce, that's when that happened. So my first love, as I knew it, where I was conscious enough, was my mother. Even like the reason why I say conscious is because when I was an infant, I loved everybody. Like, you're like a bit of God,
pure.
you're divine and pure, and everyone's just like fluffy and nice. But like when my parents were going through a divorce, I did have avoidant because my mother's state of emotional state were like fluctuating. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I wouldn't. So when you ask me like, what do you think of attachment? Because I've detached, because I've realized other people's state of mind can fluctuate. It's not that I'm avoidant or my attachment style is avoidant. I've learned that I have to look beyond that. To look, and for me, attachment then came to, I got attached to like ideologies of who I could become one day. So my attachment wasn't no longer to like people. It had become my like of ideas that I had of my own self-image.
So it's like you were attached to your own identity rather than to someone else's almost.
Yeah. But that is also a negative, like attachment to ideologies or like states of pleasure could also be a bad attachment style.
Yeah. I think it makes sense because it's like too much of anything, even if it's a good thing, is bad. So even if you're attached to a certain ideology or belief system, at the end of the day, you have things that can either serve you or they can hurt you. But I think it's also interesting because what you said is like the way that your, I guess, attachment style shifted. And that's something that's really important with attachment theory is like, you don't have one attachment style for your whole entire life.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, it's like a lot of people as well. There's the fourth attachment style that people don't talk about a lot.
I think Mary Ainsworth.
Yeah, she
like
expanded
on the topic. But so attachment style doesn't have to be one attachment style for the entirety of your life. Depending on the relationships that enter your life, your attachment styles fluctuates, and it might you might end all attachment to a certain thing. Like, people who have abusive relationships or like abusive where they abuse like substances, they have an attachment to that thing and then they have to detach from it. So not all attachment is negative, and not all attachments like have to be looked at in a negative manner. Like detaching is a beautiful thing. Like when I think about it, like I did have to have an avoidance style of attachment to my mother, but that opened a new window for me to explore other things. And it started giving my like identity, it started shaping my identity, yeah.
Yeah, because it added more layers to who you are. But what's interesting is like when you talk about attachment, you distinguish it from love, right? But if you look at it from a scientific perspective, scientists believe that attachment theory is the science of love. So they think that this is the foundation that lays the framework for the way that we love others throughout our life.
Like I also studied psychology, and like I also know all of this, and I know like I I've read the research and stuff. The reason why I can't like think of it from the top of my mind is because I'm not a teacher and I don't talk about it often, so I've forgotten all of these things. But one of the reasons I let go of science altogether is because there's only 20 hormones that can explain your state of existence, and I think we're beyond that. So like when you think about it, attachment releases the same hormones as love. But I know they're not the same thing
course.
innately.
Yeah.
It also releases the same hormones when you are desiring something, or like sexuality.
Yeah.
Like cocaine also releases those same hormones. Are they
Yeah.
all the same thing? No, we have to distinguish them internally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when I was attached to, like when you talk about like me and my mom and like the state of her like existence fluctuating or her emotions fluctuating and it affecting me, I'm so grateful for that, because that was step one on my self-discovery journey. And then I went on to find that I have to detach from my soul caretaker. And then I had to care for myself. And in understanding, and I was like, okay, how can I care for myself? Let me like make an ideology. Like I became this hero of my story, and I wanted to do these things where I like take care of myself, and I was independent. And my attachment then shifted from human to like material or ideologistic thing, ideologies, or like my thought patterns of who I could become. And then I had to shed that too later on, because I realized maybe I'll never become those things. Does that mean I'm not good enough? So I had to detach from that too.
Yeah, but the way that you describe it, like even the fact that you had to shift your system, basically you went from being attached to your mother and then shifting it to being attached to your ideology. If you think about it in a way, it still is you trying to find a safe space. Mm-hmm. You were not able to emotionally connect with your mother in that way that a mother should. And so as a result, you put your hopes and your dreams and your safety into other things, only to then like realize that actually these things that I'm attaching my identity to still aren't safe.
Exactly.
It's very full circle. But I think it's interesting because for so many people, and this is like myself included, I think we confuse love and attachment because we think of things as they are now, but not in like their highest form. We think of things based on how we experience them, like in our day-to-day lives, right?
Okay.
So if I spend enough time with you, okay, as a person, I'm going to be like, wow, Yasmin is great. I love hanging out with her. She brings me so much good energy, good vibes, joy to my life. And the more that I see you, the more familiar you become to me. What happens is I end up being attached to you. And it's like, I want you by my side all the time. But if I really loved you, I think love comes with a certain amount of freedom. I can love you and still not have to have you in my life. I think for me, the way that I've mentally like distinguished between attachment and love is that like with attachment, it says, I need you to make me happy. And it says, I need you to make me whole. But with love, it says, I want you to be happy, even if it's without me. I see you as whole, even if I am not in your presence. So it's like this it's like this difference between almost fear and abundance.
The way that you described it, I would say you're describing detachment of outcome and unconditional.
But not what love is.
Yeah. So in order to have love, you have to be detached from it. So attachment is like the thief or like the nemesis
of love.
Yeah. Because love should be liberating and freeing. And if it's not, then you're attached to it. Like the idea of me becoming this great hero of my life should be freeing. Not where like I sit there and I'm like, look at me, I haven't achieved anything.
Yeah, but it's because you don't have to be that. Okay, so we were talking about attachment and basically how sometimes it's confused with love, right?
Yeah.
I think, okay, another way that I describe it, and I've thought about this, is like with attachment, it's very rooted in the fear of loss. When you're attached to something, you never want to lose it. You hold on to it so tightly because one, you've either tied your identity to that thing, or because you feel like without it, you're somehow going to be empty, right? And if we take love, on the other hand, I think love is pure abundance. With love, there is no such thing as loss or lack because in its essence and in its nature, it is full, right?
Yeah.
So if you love truly, you'll understand that you can never ever be empty, because love will be mirrored back to you through every single thing around you, not just like that one person or thing, because love is abundant. It's everywhere. And so when you're not attached to one person, thing, or ideology, you'll realize that it exists everywhere and it exists through you, right?
Yeah. I feel like that's the divine definition of
Love.
love. And a lot of people miss to understand that because, okay, maybe this is where I can like explain the nafs. Because when you talked about like bonds where, like, you know how like there's trauma bonds where the neural pathways or the the neural pathways of your brain start creating bonds.
Yeah.
And then detaching from those bonds is hurtful because
Yeah.
your brain has made way for that thing. And then the repeating of that cycle brings you some sort of like joy
Pleasure.
and pleasure.
Yeah.
So you get like, some people are attached to the pain of that interaction. Okay. So let me explain the nafs and then maybe we can get into this too.
Okay.
So basically, I want to explain the nafs in the easiest way I know how. Okay. There are 7 layers to the nafs. The nafs is the 5D or the higher perspective of like what Hinduism calls chakras. So in a 2D perspective, you have chakras, you have 7 chakras. In a 5D perspective, you have 7 nafses. Okay?
Okay.
And the 7 nafses are broken down into like behavior patterns or attachment styles. You know, nafs al-ammara is your attachment to worldly things. And Sufis see love as reunion with God, okay? And anything that has attached itself to your soul has to be shed for that reunion to happen in the waking or conscious presence, okay? So imagine this. You have 7 chakras that are inward. And you know how like there is like geometrical shapes in Hinduism that like describe what a chakra would look like if you had shafafiya or your third eye was open? And those geometrical shapes are, geometry is a combination of numbers and letters in a way.
Yeah, because it's shapes and
Shapes and the understanding of shapes. So that's the 2D perspective of the higher state of nafs. And then the inner state of your chakra, the inner state of your nafs, or how in control of that nafs you are or that chakra, determines your halo that's outward. As within, so without.
Okay.
So the color, like sometimes when your third eye opens, you see like colors around people. That's their halo, okay? It's not exactly their halo because a halo is 2 meters wide. It has colors because those are your nafses. When you go in the spiritual realm, you might see someone who looks like Dana, but it's not you because you're not there. It's your nafs. It looks exactly like you, okay? When we die, the soul reunites with God and it has to go back to Alam Zar or like Malakut where God is. What gets left behind that goes through the tests and the trials of Barzakh or this world or like the tribulations or trial and tribulations of like hell and heaven is your nafs. So imagine, you have 7 bodies, okay? And they're all energetical bodies that look exactly like you.
Okay, wait, I have some questions.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
You didn't
some
get-
of
okay.
this went over my head.
Yeah, okay. Tell me.
Wait, first of all, when you're saying the word nafs, is this Sufi, like Sufism? Or
Sufism is like,
Is
they
it-
use Islam because Islam has a side of spirituality.
Of course.
So they're explaining.
So they're
the deeper
explaining it in
states.
a deep, but it's basically a Sufi teaching is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
basically the Islamic philosophy.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
And then my second question was going to be, okay, so because you mentioned they're like chakras. I know a lot of people know what chakras are, but can you also like elaborate on that just for people that don't know?
In the sense that like they're basically like
Energy like centers?
energy centers in your
Okay.
body. In Chinese philosophy, it's called the energy of chi. It
Okay.
could be called kundalini.
Yes, okay.
And in Islam, we call them nafs.
Okay.
Okay? So
Okay.
your mind, body, and nafs.
Okay.
Okay? Your nafs is the energy that goes through your body.
So it's not your soul.
It's not your soul. Your soul, like when you go to the spiritual realm, you look at people, in the middle of their heart center sits a globe of light. That is the soul.
Okay.
Okay? That thing cannot have any impurities in it. your guardian angel will make sure of that.
Okay.
But the nafs, like when you look at people's nafs, it's so flawed. There is ripples in it, and like sometimes like your nafs, even though it looks like you, it has like traits. I don't know how to explain. I'll explain this later, but basically imagine 7 bodies. They're called astral bodies, and I'll show you what they look like. Like, okay, look at this. I'm sure you've seen this image somewhere.
Yeah.
So basically imagine like 7 bodies like this. They look exactly like you with some like a little alteration here and there, okay? So when you have deeds or when you do things, okay, you know how the brain forms neural pathways? It starts creating like realities,
yeah.
life, okay? And you know how like when there's with string theory, when 2 items or 2 molecules are connected, not items, 2 molecules are connected to each other, when you can throw them milestones apart, light years apart, and the state of one will affect the state of other. With attachment, what ends up happening is that if something is attached to your halo, okay, imagine me and you love each other. So my nafs al-qalbi starts producing neural pathways towards you, and you're doing the same towards me. And now we have a cord from me to you, okay?
Yeah.
Your state of being will affect my state of being, because in the end of the day, we're 2 molecules. Even though you're at your house and I'm at your house, you know how sometimes your mom thinks of you, or like you think of your mom and then they
she
call?
calls. Yeah.
Why? Because there is a connection there that's it's like beyond
Space and time. Yeah. It's more
exactly. So with the reason why I want to, like, the nafs is so important, because a lot of times the nafs acts on its own accord because of repetitional patterns, because of this trauma bonds. So they could be explained with psychology, but they can also be explained spiritually. So like imagine you have this, like, all your nafses desire an outcome. Instead of the soul, that globe sitting in the middle of your chest, being in charge of the nafs and telling it where to go or what to do in pursuit of God or this higher consciousness, it has its own needs and desires. And that's why Sufis say detach from everything worldly, because it's only your nafs al-amara. When you get to meet your own nafses, like when I've told you I astral travel, when you get to see your nafs al-amara in like another world, and you go like, why does my nafs al-amara, like one of the things that happens to me, I'll explain this to you, maybe you'll understand. So you know how I astral travel?
Yeah.
Meaning when you go to sleep, you dream with your nafs. It's not that, actually I think Nietzsche talks about this, where he says it's the ego. A lot of times the nafs is referred to as the ego also. And these are like very thin lines between concepts where they're kind of explaining the same things.
Psychology and spirituality.
Yeah, so even Nietzsche talks about the fact that like when you're dreaming, it's you but in an alternative universe or a different dimension. So when you're sleeping and you're dreaming, suddenly you're in a space, okay? And everything seems so real. Like if something bites you, you feel like you feel it, or you wake up in pain of it, or like you're traumatized by it. It's because your nafs is experiencing that. And in Barzakh, later on, when you go through the trials and tribulations, that's why you feel the fire, because you are feeling it. It's just there is no physical
It's not
body.
physical, it's spiritual. Yeah.
It's spiritual. There's no physical body to like make you run away from it. Now you have to face those things. Okay? So like let's say I go to sleep. One of the things is my sacral or my other nafs, like there's 7 nafses, okay? It's called nafs lamawa or lawama. So my thing with my nafses, I'm attached to this idea that I will find my divine partner, okay? So I'm like, let's say I'm in I'm in a different veil of this world. There's different veils, and I'm in the world of jinn, okay? My nafs walks around subconsciously, like when I don't have full control of it. Like I can be a conscious dreamer. You can consciously dream and control your nafs.
Yeah,
or
like
when you're tired, when you sin a lot, when you don't have that control, you lose the control to your nafs. So when I lose control to my nafs goes around in that world, and it looks at everyone, and it goes like, is this my husband? Is this my husband? And I wake up and I cry, because I know the beings she's talking about, or like I'm talking about, are like jinn. And it sees them, and it thinks it has to attach to them. Those beings have to save her. She has not become Ashraf al-Makhluqat, the peak of creation. She has not realized the power that's sitting within my vessel, you know? Like, all my nafses have different personalities almost. Like, my solar is so strong, it fights against them. Like, if a jinn touches me, it fights back, okay? But my sacral is so weak because it has forms attachment to people. And that's why it's a sin. That's why in Islam it's referred to as sins. Does that make any sense to you?
It does, but I feel like
But
it's like
break it down for me so I can hear it from your
no,
mouth.
like I think it's like I feel like
It's so much deeper.
yeah, like it's a little bit too like it's there's too much to break down if that makes sense.
But that's like my understanding of the world. Like, it's so much deeper than science. There was a point in my life where like science could not help me anymore, and I had to look for answers in spirituality. And spirituality is even the wrong word. Like, it's just philosophy of the soul. You have to understand, you know, in my self-discovering journey, and like I've realized attachment is not even attachment styles. It like you go beyond just like what your caretaker makes you feel. You go beyond what a lover makes you feel or ideologies make you feel. I kind of like passed all of this at a very young age. Like, I remember like even material things, like early on I had a birthday where like around me were so many bags and expensive things, and I literally cried myself that day to sleep. I never forget that birthday. And like something shook in me, and I was like, this material things cannot be it's either, you know.
The end of it. But I think like the way that I feel like this needs its own dedicated episode or definition.
But tell me what you understood of it, because I'm gonna tell you why it has something to do with attachment. But tell me if you have understood my
No, I
explanation.
understand what you're saying. You're saying that it's your nafs that is then attached to worldly things and experiences and other people. It's not actually your soul.
Yeah, and then the nafs is everything is energy. The nafs is made out of energetical waves too. It doesn't have a physicality. It's not a physical body. So it's just energy. Like, sometimes it can distort. Like, you might not even look like yourself depending on the behavior that you have in this world. It affects your appearance, you know? So because it's energy, it starts creating pathways to things, and it starts getting attached to them. So now imagine, like, you know, two lovers who are, imagine like two people who are very bonding, but over negative aspects of life. Imagine, even if you're light years apart, that person you fell in love with might now become a completely different person. Exactly. But because they're connected to you, their state of being will determine yours.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Do you understand how unhealthy that is? It goes beyond psychology. It's like, if you want to leap and be better.
But I think it's still connected to, like, the way that I see it is like, to me, it's like, I understand your definition is maybe that it's its own separate realm and it doesn't actually relate to human psychology. But I see that the two are actually mirrored to each other in the sense that the way that your brain processes things and even emotions, like what you've just described, if you think about what takes place neurologically in the mind when you're in love, it's an extreme release. It's a chemical cocktail. Dopamine is released, vasopressin, oxytocin, all of these hormones that attach you to another human being. And when you're separated from that person, what actually takes place physiologically in the body is akin to actual physical pain. There's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex. This is part of the brain that's responsible for processing physical pain in the body. So when you lose love or when you're separated from the person that you're extremely attached to, it actually feels like physical pain in the body. And that person, no matter how far away they are from you or close to you, you somehow still feel this physical pain because of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's almost the same thing. So I feel like they mirror each other, like,
exactly.
So beautifully.
It's mind, body, and soul.
Yeah.
So when Sufis say that you have to detach from all things in order to feel pure love, this is what they mean. Because imagine when you have so many things that you're attached to, and there's so many strings, or like the string theory. Just imagine atoms that are somewhere else in the world. Just don't even picture
cords, energetic cords. I mean, I've heard a lot about this, and I know that, like, for example, a lot of spiritual teachings will mention that when you are connected to someone, you have an energetic cord that really literally ties you to them. And they talk about there are different ways that you can cut cords from people. I feel like this is a term, if you've heard about spirituality or if you watch TikTok videos about this, you'll hear this word come up, that we do have energetic cords that connect people. But I feel like it's so interesting because even when you talk about this stuff, like I'm someone who I am very spiritual, I'm very religious, and I've been exposed to this stuff in my life, but a lot of it goes over my head in the sense that I've never experienced it.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's such a different it's such a different experience when you've gone through something, like you've lived through it, you know, and you've had these opportunities where you've seen things that, you know, people write about, people just dream of, but they don't actually physically go through them in life. Like I get chills sometimes when I think about it. So I think like it's important also like to explain to people like when you're saying this, it's because it's something that you've seen.
Yeah. You know, like I feel like, but it's important to understand all aspects of the self. I started my journey with just wanting to know more and then looking into psychology, trying to find answers in philosophy. And then this spiritual realm is a realm that if you do not have if you're not partaking in it, you will not understand anything they're talking about. It almost seems it seems delusional or some sort of fantasy, or it seems like they were just like crazy poets who just wrote about things. You know what I mean? Like, have you read Dante's Inferno?
Yeah, I haven't read it, but
doesn't
I know
it sound
of it.
like fiction?
Yeah,
but that's Barzakh. He's describing Barzakh. Like that man went through something.
But it's interesting because it's like, oh, I'm getting chills when I think about it. A lot of the things that, you know, are in movies or that are in fiction, it's all things that someone has actually physically experienced in this life. And I think science is obviously beautiful because it explains things that happen physiologically, things that we can touch that are real. But actually, one of my favorite quotes, I heard this in a YouTube video once, and it's that science is just magic that works in the physical world.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah. So it's like, it's interesting when you think about it. There's always so many layers to things that run deeper than we can ever consciously comprehend. Even if it's like on the level of a brain and it takes place on a cellular level, I think it's interesting because science makes people feel comfortable. Like when I can explain attachment scientifically, I'm like, oh, they've done studies on this. They've done research. So now I get it.
Because your mind can start putting it into like a hierarchy of understandings. If you read this chapter, the following chapter will make even more sense. Whereas spirituality is something that maybe it's like it creates fear in people, or like it just sounds like delusions because people haven't experienced it. But I believe me, when you have goosebumps like that, it's because your innate self, your soul knows what I'm talking about is the truth. It's just you haven't entered the stage where those veils unveil for you. You know what I mean? Because we all know about it, and we know that, like, one thing I know in this world is that there is no originality. The only thing original can be God. Everything else is a replica of it.
Of something else.
So when we see things, we know they're real. It's just that we've never seen them. We haven't experienced them. So therefore, they must not be real.
But you know, it's like kind of like what we talked about in the last episode, like with manifestation. It's like, if we think about manifestation, everyone nowadays believes in manifestation, and manifestation is a concept that was so deeply rooted in the spiritual realm. And then you said it was made mainstream.
And now it makes sense.
Now it makes sense to everyone. But it's literally bringing the unseen into the seen. Okay, we get that. But then what you're talking about is kind of the same thing, right? It's like this whole other world and realm that exists that's beyond our conscious knowledge. But just because we can't see it, it doesn't mean that it's not there. You know?
And you know, we can sit here and I can tell you all the things you can Google. Like, you know, we're both like really well read on like attachment styles, and I can sit here and give you relationship advice on like the different traumatic experiences that have caused your attachment style and why you're confusing it with love. However, all of this stuff, someone else has said it, and they have said it better than I have. And they're psychologists who are practicing or they're teaching. You can look at like Jordan Peterson or David Eagleman. And they all have these podcasts. I feel like, for me, what I've realized, science is beautiful, but there is more to it. And there's this quote by Ibn Arabi, and this is why I was like yearning to pull you through this other topic of conversation. I have to read this. The ignorant one attaches himself to what perishes. So let's say you're attached to a mother figure. I mean, a mother figure can be sensitive to people because sometimes the truth, like, to not
Let's
be
just say boyfriend.
yeah, sometimes like letting go of a boyfriend is easier for people to digest, so you
Oh,
can
so you
give
wanna-
examples like this, but like you can't say like mother or father, but really anyone else who's mortal, who might lose their life in a second, any object that can deteriorate, or any state that can like be there for a second and not anymore. Attachment to anything worldly is a mistake.
Okay.
Makes sense?
That's true, but this is like my counter argument to everything that you've just said, in the sense that I agree with you that attachment to anything, ultimately, if we think about our soul and our higher purpose as human beings, is not healthy. But what is the solution, and how do people detach? That's the ultimate question, right? Because I can even sit here for hours. Like you said, we can talk about psychology. We can talk about how to change your attachment theory. We can tell you to shift your focus, change your neural pathways, change your habits, your surroundings, your environment. But ultimately, what is the real way, and the best way, let's say, to detach from things that actually don't serve you? Yeah. So like, how is it? I can answer maybe like from a more psychological perspective, what happens in the brain, but like I want to know from your angle and like everything you've just explained, how do we then detach from things that happen in this life? Like, how do we detach from people, and because this concept of love is so deeply like intertwined now with attachment, as you said, it's like a thief. How can we like disentangle the two and understand that they're actually separate things?
The thing is, like, what I'm saying is not so different to what you're saying.
Yeah.
And you know how we talked about how, like, maybe I have more of a spiritual outtake and you have a more psychological one? I feel like they're both one of the same thing.
Yeah.
Just different perceptions.
Yeah.
Perspectives of the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay? So, look, just imagine, when I talk about the nafs thing, just imagine you're a molecule. You're just one
Atom.
cylinder of energy, okay?
Okay.
Now imagine this cylinder has this strap, or like a line that's attached to
String.
a string to the divine, to your higher self, to God. This ball of light has descended onto earth to go through tests and trials, to forget that it was once a soul. So it gets attached to caretakers, people, ideas. This ball has to reunite with its creator. It has to blend and mesh back together with the thing that has created it, that has breathed life into it. But when it's attached to so many things, it's hard for it to detach, right? So that's why they say in the first night of your grave, maybe when your soul is heavy with deeds, it's hard for Malak al-Maut to come and remove the soul, and the grave feels heavy because the body, the nafs, and the soul have merged into one, and now you're polluting the soul that was once so pure. I mean, you can't do that, but let's say, you know what I mean? So, because God is always pure, and that globe of light within you will always
Be pure.
try to mold you or try to direct you towards the light, okay? So, the reason why I mentioned this in attachment is because we ultimately have to reunite with our lover, which is God, which is our creator, our creating force within all of us, okay? And the reason why I mentioned this is because later on we're gonna get to love, But this is actually quantum physics. It's entanglement theory. Yeah, entanglement. It's a string theory. It's the same concept. It's just because I know a little bit more about the spiritual realm, I might sound like I'm saying crazy things. As soon as you mention jinn, people start becoming
Jinn
a pseudoscientist.
is real. It's mentioned in the Quran, so it's like if you're someone that's
But
faithful
you believe in it
spiritual.
religiously. But if I was mentioning this in like a room full of scientists, it would be pseudoscience. It would be something unknown, and nobody wants to talk about it. And it becomes like just you being a mythical, like you've given yourself
but I
title.
also think like if we think about anything, even with science, we don't know everything yet. There was a point in which people genuinely believed the earth was flat, right? So obviously science
I love
evolves.
that we always come back to that, to like,
Okay, even if we don't want to say that the earth was flat, maybe that wasn't actually science.
but
Maybe
you
that
know,
was a religious teaching.
spiritually,
But
the earth is flat.
again, my point is that there is a lot with science that we have yet to uncover.
Yeah.
You know, there were things, if we talk about like when we first, if we look at even psychology, things that we believed in the past with the brain, it was believed in the past that the brain was plastic and it was like a machine and it was unchangeable. But now we've discovered that neuroplasticity is real and you can change the brain at any age,
Yeah.
right? So it's like there's so much that constantly evolves with science that I do think there will come a day where we can also explain these things
For sure.
through science. And
Yeah.
they will marry and they will merge and it will be like,
One of my dreams
told
is
you.
science blending in with spirituality.
yeah, because they exist. There's two parts of the same coin, in my opinion. And that's what we
Yeah.
said earlier. They mirror each other. So they are both like really interconnected. Obviously, like I think you're so passionate about this, which is why I love hearing you speak about these things. And then I like reading about like different psychology practices and things like that. So it's like I think we represent both parts really well. But you've experienced it in a way, I guess, that's different. So
Yeah.
it's nice to hear it through your own interpersonal experiences.
This is the thing, though. When you say, how can we detach, okay?
Yeah.
How can we understand these bonds and then start detaching from them? Now, the reason why I went back to this to explain is that ultimately we want to detach so we free ourselves so that we have enough of a free space so we can fall in love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know how they say, like, sometimes when you're in a relationship, you still have extra baggage and you have to take care of that before you jump into something else? It's the same thing. Now,
Can I say something funny that
Yeah.
reminded me of you? Have you ever seen those memes that are like, don't let your boyfriend stop you from meeting your husband?
no, I haven't, but that's funny. Yeah.
So it's like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that. But like to detach, you need all the weapons, let's say, that you can get.
Okay.
If you can detach, knowing psychology and science, if you do it through religious matters because you know what is there is hurting you and it's wrong, in whatever means necessary, when you realize there is a force of energy that's pulling you down, you must detach from it. You can do that in whatever way. You want us to give you some like psychological ways of doing it. There's so many like methods, there's practices.
I was gonna sorry I cut you off, but like you're right because like I think we can because my question was like how can we actually detach? You're right. There's so many different ways to detach. So I guess we don't need to be prescriptive because if you really want to know how to detach,
Yeah.
maybe we're not like the expert sources and everybody's a little bit different.
I mean, the first step to it is acknowledging there is an attachment.
Yeah.
Or you can say shedding light on the subject.
Yeah.
Once you realize there is a pattern that's being repetitive and repeating itself in your life, you realize there is a problem because now you're stuck in a cycle of thought, cycle of habit, cycle of attracting abusive partners,
Yeah.
cycle of something.
So, but then, okay, to bring into like another layer into that. So if we're talking about like attachment and ultimately the goal is to detach from things, does that mean that there are no healthy types of attachment? Is my question to you? Or do you think
There is.
Okay.
As long as like the way I picture things, like I understand everything through energy, okay? It's just the way my brain thinks and like I think in images. So when I would think of healthy attachment, you have to be a ball of light and the state of anything else around you should not have any effect on your inner state. So the outside world should not fluctuate your inner state. That's when your soul is in charge of all your nafses. Okay? And what I mean by that, in the spiritual realm, like you can think of it in like small ways, but in the spiritual realms, like the state of the sun, the moon, the galaxy, nothing should
Affect you.
affect you in any way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe this is like a different type of philosophy, but it also sounds a lot like Stoicism, where it's like the goal is for you to not allow anything in the outer world to affect your inner world.
Yeah.
But I do think it's funny because as much as I agree with you, I also acknowledge that the other end of it is that it's extremely difficult.
For sure. Like, you know, sometimes I sit there and like, let's say somebody has an opinion of me, okay? Let's say, or for me, like, I don't really care about opinions anymore, but like, Let's say I feel like we had a conversation and it wasn't a soul to soul one. It tears me apart. I'm like, oh my God, this conversation wasn't a philosophical one. It wasted my time. I don't know what to do with myself now. I hate this relationship that I'm in. But sometimes, like, people, you can yap.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't like yapping, though. It just wastes my time.
Oh, I'm a yapper.
No, but, like, we yap about, like, beautiful things. We
It
talk
depends.
about things.
Yeah, we talk about meaningful things, but I just like the word because I'm like, I like talking.
Like, you know me. Like, you know how, like, sometimes I'm, like, sitting somewhere and, like, let's say I'm in a...
I understand what you mean. Like there are certain conversations and experiences you go through and you feel like they recharge your soul versus certain experiences that physically drain you.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting because
But why am I getting physically drained? I should be in control enough and detached from the conversation so much so that it does not
but you know,
affect me.
I also think you have to understand like at the end of the day human beings are like sponges, right? Even if what you're saying, right? You still have an energy. You are energy, right? And if we think
Yeah.
about energy and electricity, if you add a little spark here, it's going to affect your energy somehow, even if you don't want it to. And I think that's where you have to go back. You have to go home, maybe cleanse yourself, cleanse the space that you're in, clear your energy and recharge yourself. And obviously human beings are all different. Like, for example, I know you're more of an introvert. I'm more of an extrovert. These are, again, different words to explain the way that our energies are affected by other people. So it's natural, I think, that at some point when you're having a conversation with someone and it's not feeding your soul, you're going to feel drained.
Yeah, I get what you mean, but like, shouldn't I be in control enough so that nothing affects my inner state?
But that's like saying that you want a battery to always be constantly charged.
Yeah. But
Which
that's
is-
when you reunite with God or you mesh with God in this state.
But you know what I think?
You start doing that.
I think it's interesting because what you're saying then also means, and I don't think this applies to everyone, but a lot of people will then isolate from others in an attempt to detach from them. But I don't think that's healthy either, because even if we think about human beings and the way that we were created, we're designed to be with other people.
True.
Even from a bioevolutionary perspective, we evolved to where we are today because we grew in hunter-gatherer societies. We were together. So it makes no sense to say that we have to be separate. But detachment in its essence, it's like, I think it's mastering the art of separation and union. It's like being separate while still being able to connect.
Because look, the thing that I'm talking about is like something I haven't achieved myself either.
Yeah.
But I've read about it.
Yeah.
And like being in a state where you're detached from everything is like the ultimate goal, where like nothing can fluctuate the state of your inner
World.
being. Yeah.
It's so interesting though, because you know, also when you say this, like to me, for example, I'm not gonna lie to you, as much as what you're saying sounds so poetic and beautiful to me, I'm like, yeah, but I like being attached to other people. I like the fact that, you know, when I love someone deeply, my world is somehow connected to theirs. And maybe, yeah, you're right. Like in a big sense, that means I have a lot of attachment to like this worldly life, but that's the way that I experience it. And I think a lot of people, like, for example, for me, I know I'm a very empathetic person. So when I love someone and I care about someone, I care about them so deeply. Like even you, if it's my best friend, if it's like whoever it is, if you're someone in my life that I love fiercely.
Yeah.
Again, I use the word love, but it also comes with attachment for me. Because if someone were to like disappear from my life all of a sudden, I'd be like, wait a minute. And I wouldn't stop texting and calling and asking because I'm attached to that person. And obviously if they wanted their space and their freedom, ultimately I'd be like, sure. And I think that's maybe where love almost comes in. It's because you understand and you respect the other person's personal boundaries and space. But it almost, as beautiful as it sounds to be detached, a part of me still feels like that emotion is still so relevant to me. And I want to be attached.
I love that because that's what makes us human. Like, you remember how we talked about, like, in the beginning, it was like my attachment to my mother and that I had to detach from that and stuff. I love, like, when I look at that, it now from afar, it was such a beautiful experience. It took me through so much. In being in that state, I learned more about myself, okay? But, like, I've come to a place where, like, I'm no longer I love that, and I love watching you do that. But for me personally, I cannot. The thought of it, that like the state, because I feel like my sole purpose here on earth is to learn self mastery, and to feel that someone else's or something else is determining my state of mind or choosing my path. All of these things create that fear of me losing my freedom of choice. And like as a soul, when I detached from my beloved and I was saying goodbye to God, I said goodbye so that I can have willpower, that I can choose for myself. And I made this promise that no matter what, I would find you in the trees. Everywhere I look, I will find you.
God.
So the fact that like when I'm sitting with people and I see that I'm attached to them instead of my true love, it insults me. It makes me feel like my promise to God was untrue. That now I came here and I forgot who it was who breathed life into me in the first place. And when I say God, I'm not talking about like a religious figure like Zeus that's sitting there saying yes or no. I'm talking about this like consciousness that's behind every single thing.
Yeah.
So like for me, I almost feel like if I attach to anything else, I'm cheating.
I think you said that beautifully. I do think it makes sense, but I have such a again, it's like two coins. It's very yin and yang, black and white, right? But my perception of it is like I see that my purpose in life, and I've given this a lot of thought. I could, who knows, ultimately at the end of the day, but I know the way that I currently identify my purpose, and after doing a lot of soul searching, I believe that I exist in this world to be a force of love, to spread love in whatever way and capacity that I can. And so for me, whenever I do anything, I always try to remind myself to breathe love into everything I touch. And that is a constant reminder I give myself, because that's how I want to show up in this life, through love. Now, what you just said is interesting, because your definition of it was that you can only love the creator, right? You can, if you love other people, it's almost removing your attachment or your love for God. But I actually see it as reverse. I see that when I love everything around me, it's only because of the love that is put in me through God, if that makes sense.
I understand that, but in order for me to have my glass filled at all times, I need to keep that string attached.
Yeah.
I've seen beings that have been detached, and you don't want that to happen to you.
Yeah.
You
I
get
understand
lost.
your perspective.
So
It's like but I think it's interesting, because to me,
he fills your glass, therefore you fill the glass of others.
Yes.
It only works that way.
Exactly.
However, I have to say it's okay to see the world differently, because we're like Bani Adam as a yaktigar and shows.
What does that mean?
Wait. We're all organs to a body.
Yes.
You might be the heart, and maybe I'm the brain, maybe I'm the ears, maybe I'm the eyes and I see beauty in everything.
Yeah.
Maybe you hear beauty in everything. So for you, like you might, I understand.
We have different functions or perceptions of it.
When I hear your perspective, I self-indulge in the sin of living through you. I wish, you know that scene, there is this scene in The Matrix where like the veils of the world unveil for Neo and he sees life as it is, you know? And there's one of them that betrays every character in The Matrix. And when Neo asks him, he's like, why did you betray us? And why did you choose to come back to this world and forget that the real world is somewhere else? He says, it's only because I wanted to taste steak again. I sold you all for a piece of steak. So for me, like seeing the veils of this world unveil for me, I beg sometimes to self-indulge in the things in life that make us human. Because yeah, I want to also attach to my mother, and I want to attach to someone and cry and like have them hold me, and it's just I've understood that all of those things are just weighing my soul down, and I have to return what I've borrowed from God back to God. So my nafs will have to, if I attach to anything, my nafs will have to pay for that. And because something happened to me where I kind of had to do that here, I died, like before I died. It's so scary. I don't ever want to live without God for a second. The minute my soul, like, got separated from my nafs, I was shredded to pieces and I didn't know what to do. So I need my nafs in control of my soul, and I need to surrender to my soul. I need every part of my nafs to be obedient to my soul, which is ultimately God. So I had to let go of desires, attachment, what I want in life. I realized, you know how they say you can make plans but God laughs?
Yeah.
I made plans with my nafs and my soul was like, ha, 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 ha. I'm going to take you through something that's going to rock your world and you'll never be the same again. And when I sit here, I'm not talking from a place of like up and down. It's like a cry out for help. I wish I could have that herd mentality and stick with the others and have them protect me and go in a gathering of people and drink and enjoy myself and do whatnot. You know what I mean? Like give it all up for a steak.
No, I don't mean it in that extreme
Does that make sense?
But I think you see things, we've said this before, you see things as very black and white. What you just described, there was no gray in between. And I see the world in a very, like, it's shades of gray. There's so much in between. So you just described two very extreme forms, which is either you're highly connected, you're conscious, you're aware, or you're completely oblivious and ignorant. But there is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, for sure.
But again, I think it's really important to note that every single person has their own path in life. And the path that I take doesn't have to be the path that you take. We each walk and forge our own path through our own forests. And the ultimate destination that we arrive to is the one that is closest to what our soul desires, if we're truly connected with ourselves.
But do you get why I think attachment is the soul nemesis to love?
Yeah, I do. I do, because like attachment is the opposite of love, right? It is everything that is rooted in fear, in loss, in abandonment, in emptiness. While if we think of love, it is abundance, it is expansive, it is openness.
So what do you think, now that we know this and we've established this, what do you think about unhealthy worldly attachment styles? Like in relationships, attachment styles and ideas. Why do you think these things harm us, like from a psychological perspective?
Well, I think it's interesting because you did talk earlier about how the mind forms neural pathways, right? Anytime we engage in anything repeatedly, we're creating a habit, right? So whether it's something that's good for us or something that's bad for us, the more we engage in it, the more that we strengthen those neural pathways in the mind, right?
Yeah.
So for example, brushing your teeth every day, you wake up, you automatically do it. It's an automatic thought process that you don't necessarily think twice about. Just like how every few seconds, most of us pick up our phone, right? Engaging with toxicity and people that are unhealthy for us creates the same patterns in the brain. You become addicted to it. Whether it is something that is hurting you or actually bringing you joy and euphoria when you attach to another person. So what happens when you're in love, and if we think about the brain neurologically, what happens is that there's a chemical cocktail released. You know how people say that love feels like a drug? It's because it literally feels like a drug in the brain. So the parts of the brain called the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area, these are dopamine-rich parts of the brain that get activated when you're in love. So when you're in love with someone, your brain is literally releasing dopamine, so it feels really rewarding being around that person. Now, let's say that that person that you're with is someone that is hurtful, abusive, narcissistic, or even someone that is just not that good for you, you know? You'll still release dopamine when you're around them. You're still going to have that euphoria-like sensation because your brain has chemically decided that you love them.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what dopamine is the same hormone that's released when you sniff. I was going to say smoke cocaine.
Oh, cocaine, yeah. So dopamine
Sniff cocaine.
Dopamine is actually a neurotransmitter. It's released as a reward. It's related to reward and motivation. So whenever you do something that's good, your brain will release dopamine because it's a feel-good hormone. Same as serotonin. All of these things make you feel really good. That's why, like, for example, let's say you go shopping and you buy something new that you've had on your wish list for a really long time. Your body's like, oh my God, yay. That's dopamine being released.
To like paint a picture of what dopamine does, like imagine, I've told you this before, but imagine a socket of electricity and a plug, okay?
Yeah.
So what dopamine does is when you sniff it, it goes directly into your brain. And what it does is the cocaine particles block the electrical plug that is your neurotransmitters. Because when you look at or like Google like neurotransmitters and an image of them,
like shapes.
They literally look like shapes that are like pieces of puzzle that have to go and mend together. Yeah. So cocaine blocks these neurotransmitters, and when your brain wants to pass messages and connect, it cannot because it's blocked. And it keeps trying because your brain is functioning in a normal way. And that's why with cocaine, people get addicted to it because they need higher dosages because the holes or like the part of it that's the plug keeps expanding because it needs more of it. So with cocaine and like how it does this, what ends up happening is like all of the cocaine particles, because they're blocked now, your neurotransmitters, they start like just roaming around your brain freely. And that's why also when you're in love with someone and the same thing happens, they feel like they're taking a lot of rental space in your mind because cocaine does the same thing. It just takes up space in your mind. It blocks pathways. Now you're blind by love.
So actually, interestingly enough, there's a lot of studies that show that when you're in love, the the part of your brain that's responsible for processing like people and like analyzing them, and there's a word that I'm thinking of. I can't remember what it was, but like your social acumen kind of goes down. So you'll often, when you're in love, you won't see people's faults. You're kind of like blinded to it. And what you said also like about what happens in the brain when you're in love. Is also there's a lot of cortisol that's released. So cortisol is a stress hormone, and when cortisol is released in the body, it makes you feel like very anxious and stressed out. And this is the reason why when you're in love, it feels like that person is taking up so much of your mind.
I'm gonna tell you guys like a personal experience that I've had. The first time that I ever had a crush on someone, I remember like we're Middle Eastern, so like our first experiences of any interaction with like males were like really in later years of our life. But was it the same for you?
What? Oh, no, it was late, yeah.
Yeah, late. Not like 12.
No.
So later in life, I realized the first time that I ever like had a crush on someone, I remember looking at them and I realized that because I've had a fantasy or idea of what I want, I've pictured this like male. And now because I've just met the first male that I ever had an interaction with, I ended up putting his face on the fantasy that I had. It wasn't him that I loved or that I desired in no shape or form. I was attached to my fantasy of this great guy, and because there was no one available or for a lack of choice, I had literally copy pasted this guy's face into my fantasy. This guy in my fantasy would bring me flowers, would take care of me and do this and this. And we're like, you know that scene from like Pretty Woman, I think, or something, where like they go on this like helicopter ride? I had these fantasies. And like this guy, we're just like young kids, you know what I mean?
Yeah. He wasn't getting you flowers.
But I would treat him as if he is that man.
Yeah.
So imagine do you understand why attachment can be so wrong?
Because that's also delusional attachment. And I think there's you have to distinguish between the two, obviously, because you can meet someone. Actually, I saw this video last night on Instagram, and it was describing this dynamic where a woman is dating a man. He picks her up, he takes her out, they go on dates, everything seems like it's going well. He doesn't lie to her, he doesn't cheat on her. And so she starts to think, oh my God, wow, he's such an amazing man. But he's just doing the bare minimum, texting you back on time, picking up to go on dates, taking you out. This is the bare minimum. But because she's been getting breadcrumbs, she has been emotionally starved. She feels like him doing the bare minimum is the entire world. And she starts to idealize him and think, wow, this is such an amazing man. So her bar is so low that she's now lowered her standards down to here. And because she's so emotionally starved, she gets breadcrumbs and thinks, wow, I'm eating a whole entire steak.
I know you don't watch Dave Chappelle, but literally when you said that, I remembered something. So he introduced me to this book called Pimp. And basically they asked this like American pimp from the 70s, like, what have you done to be able to control all the women that are working for you and like make money or make such a big success out of their livelihood, you know? And he says, if you beat a woman with a coat hanger for long enough, when you fix her up and hand her some medicine, she'll feel good.
Oh, God.
She'll forgive you.
Yeah, that's horrible.
And she'll forget that it was you who had beat her in the first place.
Yeah.
And then like I remember like Dave Chappelle, like he made it into a comedy bit, and it was so beautifully said. I love when he like mixes like comedy with such like harsh truths,
Yeah.
but you digest it better because it's funny.
Yeah.
And when you say this, obviously mine is like the extreme version of that, but it's kind of same, but it's blurred out.
Yeah.
You know, because like they can, people like can take your confidence away from you. They can do a lot of things and then get away with it because then
But I
they'll
think
be the person fixing you up.
those are really manipulative people. You know, people love to throw around the word gaslighting and emotional abuse and trauma. But if you think about these things, they don't happen overnight. It's not someone ignoring one text occasionally. It's someone constantly making you feel like you are less than, that you are not worthy enough.
The grooming.
Yeah, that you deserve this, and you start to believe it. That's the worst part, is not that someone is telling you these things, it's that you actually start to believe them about yourself. And when you form emotional attachments to people like that, because let's face it, in a lot of circumstances, you see cases where people are in really horrific and abusive relationships, but they can't leave that person. And obviously that goes just beyond a physical emotional attachment. That's a traumatic attachment. It's
That's
like
a trauma bond.
the hand that hits you is also the hand that feeds
Feeds
you.
you.
And so you cannot separate yourself from them. And when you think about cases like that, really the only way, I can't speak on the only way to remove yourself, but
Yeah.
ultimately it's only through a process of understanding that you are worthy of so much more, and that you have been emotionally starved for so long that you believe that those breadcrumbs are steak. And once you understand that,
This is the thing, like with psychology of it and like explaining things like this, I wish like we had professionals that like they could have like call centers that people could call and stuff. These are like very traumatic cases where like people are bonding with each other over their traumas.
Yeah.
Now this has been something like, this is the extreme rare of it, but there's also like extreme rare cases of it, but there's also like a middle ground where like, you know how like there are people who are friends just because they have the same traumas?
you know what? I'm going to give you a middle case example of it.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm someone, I said it earlier in the podcast, I've always had more of an anxious attachment style. So this means that when I'm in dynamics with other people, I'm constantly afraid, and this occurs on a very subconscious level. I'm very afraid that they will eventually leave me or that I will not be able to be with them. And I'm going to talk about this past tense because thankfully I've worked on myself a lot. But throughout my life, I have always attracted people that were extremely emotionally unavailable. People who could not give me what ultimately in my heart of hearts I thought I desired, right? Which was this love that was expansive and receptive. But I always found myself in situations with people who were quite literally giving me breadcrumbs, right? They were not there for me emotionally. They were not supportive. They weren't bad people. They were not abusive or neglectful or hurtful, but they always gave me the absolute bare minimum, right? So we're talking about people that will, disappear and only show up when it's convenient for them. People that will not text, check on you, or ask about you. They only care about themselves. I would form extreme emotional attachments to people like that, and I would tell myself that I'm in love with them, that I need this person because he's so this, he's so that. And I would describe all of these like laundry list of qualities that actually meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. Someone can be smart, intelligent, ambitious, wealthy. You can have a whole laundry list, but if they don't show up for you in the way that you deserve, they're still not good for you.
But listen, the thing is, how can someone give you stuff they don't have?
Yes. Yeah.
How can somebody fill up your glass when their glass is empty?
Yeah.
And if you're looking at other people to fill up your glass, it's because yours is empty too. And it's almost becomes these like energetical vampires where like you're trying to frame love to be an exchange.
No, I agree.
You give me this and I give you this. And that's why it's attachment. The reason I do appreciate you, and I do appreciate that there is levels to understand a higher meaning of love. But in order to do that, we have to, if you have a wound, I've told you this before, you first have to clean the wound. You have to shed light on it. You have to take it layer by layer, put alcohol on it, and then come back, visit it again in like a few days, put another wrapping on top of it. And a wound can only be cleansed or cleared in like time.
Yeah.
So every time I mention this, you get like agitated.
No, I wasn't agitated. I was gonna say, like, what I was describing now wasn't love. Like, I know I wasn't in love with those people. That's why I was like getting nervous, because I was like trying to say that I didn't love those people. But at the time when I was experiencing that, and when I say those people, it was like two people in specific, but it was me repeating my own trauma. And this is what we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, right? You sometimes get into cycles where the way that you were raised, the emotional bonds you formed as a child, you carry through and you replicate those patterns as an adult. And I was replicating patterns that I had learned very early on in life. My mom is someone that gave me so much love, but unfortunately, the way I internalized it was almost in a way where it felt like, and again, this is no shade to my mom, but like, it's like I had to do certain things in order to be loved in a certain way. So I always associated love with doing instead of being, right? And it wasn't her fault, but it was always because my mom was so positive. She gave me so many words of affirmations and so much praise growing up that whenever I achieved something, she would be my biggest cheerleader. So I internalized this belief that the more I achieve, the more that I do, the more that I conquer, the more loved and praised I'm going to be. And so I grew up into an adult that would replicate that exact same thing in relationships. But you're right. I was finding people whose glass was completely empty because mine wasn't even full in the way that it was. I thought that love had to be earned. I didn't know that it was given freely.
You understand that, like, with attachment styles, 8 billion people have 3 or 4 attachment styles. So the stories are relentless. There are so many different types, you know. You might have a different attachment style, you might have a different attachment style, but all of them are toxic in a way because it is still attachment.
Yeah.
Okay? So the opposite of that, a healthy attachment style, is an attachment style that's not there. There is no attachment. You come when you need your glass to be filled, and that person comes when their glass has to be filled. But it's still an exchange.
I don't know how to, what you would call it then, because saying that the only healthy attachment is no attachment, I understand it consciously.
The only love is unconditional love.
Yes.
If I have my glass filled, I am not waiting for you to fill it up.
Your glass. But that's my point, is like, you're not attached. That's what we're saying, was you want to step away from attachment and step into love.
Yeah.
It's so hard to do.
Why is it so hard to do? Explain why it is hard.
Well, okay, you know what? I'm going to give you a personal story. Today, when I was leaving the house, my mom was talking about my dad, and my mom has been really emotional the past few days, and she was crying, and she was telling me how much she loves my dad, and how that whenever she gets mad at him, it's because she loves him so much and she's afraid for him. And then I remember trying to tell her, it's because of fear. What you're describing is not love, it's fear. And I know we've discussed this before, but I always say it, the opposite of love is not hate, it is fear. When you're afraid of losing something, that is the exact opposite emotion of love, because love is expansive. Fear shrinks and it makes you small. What my mom, I could see so visibly, is that she was describing fear. She mentioned something that my dad said in passing about something happening to him, and she was crying hysterically. And I just remember thinking to myself, she is so attached and so afraid of not only losing him, but losing us. Is fear. And I remember trying to describe to her, like, no, there's actually a difference, because what you're describing is fear. It's not love. But I also remember thinking to myself that, you know, when I love someone, I love them in that same way. Even though it's a normal part of human life to understand that people have their own liberties and freedoms, and that there may come a time where there will be distance between two people, it's still this feeling where it hurts. And it's undeniable.
You know, one of the reasons that people mistake love for attachment is because of the feeling of comfort and security. Some thoughts or some habits and neural pathways are comfortable because they've been there and you know nothing else.
Yeah.
The reason why it's uncomfortable and like you don't like the thought of detachment is because you've never detached ever.
No.
You don't know what it's like to detach. And this is the thing, yeah? Because we as Middle Eastern women, like both of us are like from the Middle East, and like we have grown up and family has been the number one thing in our life. We've never lived as individuals without our family. And throughout time, I realized I am attached to my family, and there was no way of me leaving them behind where I can go and like prosper and do my own thing. But when you have like an environment where they are always constantly affecting you because you're living together, I had to learn how to detach while I'm still there. So for me, the blurred lines is not like you. I know you say that I explain things in black and white. That's true. But it's important to understand black and white so only you can have a healthy gray area. So now I live in the same household with the same people that I'm attached to, but really I'm detached from them even though I'm present.
But I don't know how to describe it. Like what you're describing to me doesn't seem like something I want. It doesn't,
Because
at
you
all.
don't know anything different than
No,
it.
but even the way that, because I've heard you speak about your dynamic in the situations, like to me, that doesn't feel like an experience that I want to have in this life.
It's because I have not mastered it yet, and you don't see in me an idol because I'm still on the journey. If I was a master of spirituality and if I sat in front of you and I was like, I've achieved this and this and this, while this was my journey, you would maybe think that I'm more.
Because you're still going through it. You're not at
What
the
was that
end.
word you told me on the way to the bathroom? You were like credible. I'm more credible
Yeah.
if I had an outcome. But because I'm still on the journey and I'm a student on this path, you don't trust my take. Does that make sense?
Let's not talk about you. We can talk about a monk, okay? Let's say that.
No, but listen, the thing you told me about your mom, she was pouring. You know, when somebody, a lot of times people like come and find
It's
confined.
because I told her we were talking about love today, and then she went on this tangent.
So, you know, like sometimes like people confide in other people just so they can pass on what they're feeling to them.
Yeah.
Okay. So your glass was being filled, but with her perception and thoughts.
Yeah.
So if she is still living you're living with other people that you're attached to. I mean, parents are like the core of your energy. Like, even, I don't want to again get into like spirituality, but your nafs al-ammara, your first root chakra, is connected to your ancestors. 7 generations before you are like affecting you whether you know it or not. Okay, again, pseudoscience, whatever. But so the fact that your parents are like they're still pouring into you, and you try to detach from it with going after science or like knowledge to evade what's happening here with your mindset, but very much so energetically they're pouring into your glass.
Yeah.
And then you take that poured glass, and based on that glass being poured by others, you now form other attachment styles where they're based on fear of loss. So really you're dating your parents but in different shells.
I agree. But you know what I've done now for myself when it comes to, let's say romantically at least, is I don't do what I used to do. I don't idealize people anymore. And I don't put my hopes and my expectations. And it's interesting because I remember I was speaking to someone about this, and I was saying how, you know, now when I'm in a romantic relationship, I understand that I might not end up with that person, and that ultimately we're not going to be together forever, right? And then that person said to me, what you're describing is not love. What you're describing is actually that you've mastered the art of accepting that other people will leave you. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, wait a minute.
You know, like one of the things that like when I went, I was born and raised in the UAE, you guys. And then recently I went to Iran when I was a kid, but I went to Iran also now. And when I said this, it reminded me of something I told my mom. I was like, you know how the prophets came here to like take down idol worshippers? And still there are so many people who are idol worshippers. They don't realize it. We don't have giant statues that we bow down to, but we make people those statues.
Yeah.
And to idolize anyone, to be these religious figures, it takes away from what their message was, which was union with God. So for you to sit there and like, you might not do this in the like in maybe like idolize a hero. You know how Americans idolize celebrities so much? There is also, everything has a spectrum. So it's like idolizing religious figures, idolizing celebrities, making politicians your gods. And then there is also idolizing your partner.
Yeah.
Thinking they know best than you know nothing. You know what I mean? It's only in stepping into your true power that you can detach.
Yeah.
So tell me, who's your idol in this life? Who are you worshiping that you don't know of?
Like people?
Yeah. You have some attachment to this ideology. It could be you. Like I had an idol, which was me, the highest version of me, and I had to tear her to shreds because it wasn't what my soul wanted. I have it in the back of my phone. So I had this like mood board I've told you guys in the first episode where I wanted to be like this Hollywood. And I thought I'm going to be this like girl who's going to be like, you know, I had to shred all of that because it wasn't my divine path. So I had to break down an idol. Who's your idol? What is this idea you're attached to that's stopping you?
I think the first thing that came to my mind is the idea of love that I've had in my mind for so long, and the idea of finding my soulmate. And I think it was only through going through experiences where I got what I thought I wanted, only to then realize it wasn't what I wanted at all, that I was able to understand that my attachment to meeting my soulmate and my ultimate partner was exactly what was blocking me from it. And I think I romanticized that idea for so long in my life. The idea of meeting this perfect person that would come in and show me things that I didn't even know about
Save
myself.
you.
And exactly, you're looking for a savior in another person. And it was only through understanding that I have to be that own person for myself. I am my own savior. Of course, God is, but I am the one that has to pull myself out of where I am, that I got to the understanding that ultimately no other person can do that for me. And it's still something that, because it's been so deeply ingrained in my mind, you know, you said it, like as Arab Middle Eastern women, we're all brought up with this ideology that somehow a man is going to save us, that we're going to get married and we're going to live this fantasy
Listen, bro,
life.
I tell my dad I want to go to Umrah, and he's like, get married, go to
Yeah,
Umrah.
yeah,
I want to
exactly.
travel, get married. And it's not even like our own, we're not
Oh.
losers who are sitting here and we're uneducated and we don't know how to like break these barriers, you know? It's just that because we were told so many times, like, I want to go to meet God, like go to a pilgrimage.
And it's like,
if
go
you
with your
don't have a
husband.
man, you can't go.
Yeah, but it's like, we're so inundated with this information from everywhere. Even if we look at it in the West, it's not just Arab women. If we look at Disney movies and all of the things
Oh,
in
yeah,
the
for
media
sure.
that's portrayed, there's always this idea of Prince Charming that's going to come and save you. But guess what? Prince Charming doesn't exist. You have to be your own Prince Charming. And I think for me, the idol that I'm trying to break is that idea of Prince Charming.
But you know, it goes beyond this. Like I also noticed that with me, like I have attachment to like things like, for example, because I had an avoidant attachment style maybe when I was growing up, there's like smaller things that like if I want to really nitpick, like for example, if I'm in a conversation where I'm not understood or I'm judged, immediately I have like it's a traumatic experience and I try to detach from you because you're trying to bring me back to a pattern that I've broken away from.
Yeah.
So you have to like become conscious of what that pattern is, and you constantly, you know how like God gave you teeth, but you have to brush them to keep it up.
Yeah.
To keep up the
To keep
appearance
the
of
teeth.
them being clean. Like nobody has like crooked teeth when they like are born, you know? So there with life there comes a lot of maintenance that's harder than even detachment. So I know there's like ideas that you've detached from, but you don't constantly maintain those ideas. You know, there's this like beautiful poem by Rumi. He says, it's like, you know, the first day at kindergarten, all of us are born, but we know there's a parent waiting for us at home. And we have to go back to that parent. We have to reunite with our creator. So anything that in the kindergarten is going on, it's fun to have play with the other kids, be born, have a body, experience love and emotions without the parent, and do whatever we want. But one day we have to go back to that parent. We're going to end with a question. What remains of love when the thief is gone? And as always, it's not about having the perfect answer, but wondering, reaching, and remembering that what we seek is also seeking us.